Chapter 23. Treadon Nelson. Treadon surfaced slowly, surrounded by pain. It was the only sensation. He fought to come out of it. Like swimming up from a deep dive, the pain began to localize. His neck, his back and shoulder. Most of the pain was coming from his shoulder, his right shoulder. He forced his eyes open. The dim light of an approaching dawn silhouetted an uneven skyline, everything cast in grays and darker grays. The blurry surrounding came into focus. Expensive leather, sleek dashboard, Jaren's car. There was a layer of dust on his arms and chest. He pushed the airbag off to the side and tried to dust himself off. His shoulder screamed in protest. He touched the side of his face and felt where the airbag left a burn. The airbag had left a burn. The driver's side seat was empty. Treadon felt a surge of panic. The deflated airbag hung lifelessly from the steering wheel. Treadon looked around, but a stab of pain stopped him from sitting forward. He looked down and tested his shoulder with his left hand. The seatbelt had dug deep into his skin, leaving a large red gash bleeding through his shirt. He unlocked his seatbelt and wrestled to open the door. A short tree with a mass of winding branches blocked the door from opening. He stood up to climb out on the driver's side and caught sight of Jaren. Treadon climbed across the seat, bumping his knee on the steering wheel and catching his foot on the deflated airbag. He used the door for balance and flopped his body over the side. He straightened up too quickly and had to lean heavily on the door as a wave of dizziness threatened to send him back into unconsciousness. He took several deep breaths to clear his head and then stumbled over to where Jaren balanced on his hands and knees. The sound of a car driving past echoed between the hills. They were 100 yards from the highway, the car half buried in the hill. No one had stopped or noticed the accident, and the nice men in the SUV didn't appear to have called 911. Treadon leaned down and put a hand on Jaren's back. "You okay?" Jaren swallowed, holding still for a full minute. Then he sat back on his heels. "That was close," Jaren said. "I almost puked in my car." "You were worried about the inside of your car? That thing has got to be totaled." Jaren's face took on a look of panic, and he struggled to his feet. He swayed dangerously, grabbing his head with both hands. Treadon reached out, but Jaren waved him off. "I got this." Jaren dropped his hands and looked up at the sky. "It just feels like someone jabbed a nail into the base of my skull." He pointed to a spot on the back of his head, a few inches above his collar, where a scar had kept his hair from growing. He rolled his head around, cracking his neck. Then he walked unsteadily back to his car and began a detailed inspection, rubbing both hands along the outside of the driver's side door. Treadon waited for the groan at the side of the damage, but it didn't come. Treadon took a better look at the car. It was covered by a layer of dirt, but there wasn't a scratch or dent anywhere on this side. Treadon walked around the back of the Aston Martin, disbelief welling up in him. The back was undamaged. The side showed no scratches. Either the car was made of some material that didn't scratch, or he'd dreamed the whole chase. He could still see his reflection in the side of the black SUV. It couldn't have been a dream. "Oh no, this is terrible." Jaren pointed at a crack in the headlight he'd uncovered at the front of the car. It was the only damage Treadon could see. Impossible. Deep tire marks were gouged into the ground from where the Aston Martin had hit and skidded into the side of the mountain. The ground had wave marks in the rocks and dirt all around the landing point, like a ripple moving out from where the car had hit. "What happened?" Treadon asked. "How are we still alive?" Jaren shook his head. "I don't know. We must have got lucky, I guess. I kind of blacked out there for a little bit. I feel super weird, like my head is going to explode." Treadon read his friend's posture, facial expression, and the way his left hand moved from his hip to the side of his face, like it couldn't find a comfortable landing place. Jaren wasn't lying exactly, but Treadon could read that his friend felt responsible for both the accident and their survival. A movement near the overpass at the bottom of the hill caught his attention. A familiar blue Pontiac, his mom's profile visible, hair wild like she'd been driving with the window down. "It's your mom," Jaren said. "How'd she know we were here?" "I don't know. No one even called the police." Before Abigail reached the road that hit a T at the bottom of the hill, a second familiar car took the exit. A Bentley, immaculate, with rims that flashed as the first rays of the sun climbed over the mountain. "Word travels fast," Jaren muttered. "How did your dad find us?" "He probably bugged my car. But that doesn't really explain why he came, since he's so adamant that I'm on my own now." They shared a look, shrugged, and climbed gingerly down toward the road. It was steep. Dust kicked up whenever they slipped a few inches, parked haphazardly on the side of the road, and climbing over a short crash barrier when Jaren and Treadon reached her. Abigail stumbled forward and pulled Treadon into a hug. Pain flashed from his shoulder, white filling his vision. He flinched away from her. "You're hurt." She said the words with so much relief, Treadon felt bad. There was a note in her voice. Like a part of her thought he'd died. She touched his face and arms, like she was checking to see he wasn't a ghost. "I'm okay," Treadon said. "Really, just a seatbelt bruise and an airbag burn." She pulled her hand away to see the blood from his shoulder. He expected a worse reaction, but for some reason, she handled it like she dealt with wounds all the time. Xander pulled up and stepped out of his Bentley. He held the handle of his door with a white-knuckle grip. Jaren stopped a few feet away from his dad, hands in his pockets. "Were you drinking?" Xander asked. Abigail's nails dug into Treadon's forearms at the mention of alcohol. Even before reading people, Treadon could tell his mom hated alcohol with a passion. Her internal fear left Treadon avoiding getting drunk for more reasons than athletics. "No," Jaren said. "Are you hurt?" Xander's tone was crisp and careful, but not unkind. "No." Xander let go of the handle and stepped forward, pulling Jaren into a full hug, pinning Jaren's arms to his side, clinging with a desperate pressure. When he pushed Jaren back, he took a moment to look into his son's face. "What happened?" Abigail asked. Xander's mouth opened, but before he could answer, the roar of a loud engine overpowered the conversation. The deep, guttural roar of a motorcycle echoed through the valley, making it difficult to tell which direction it came from. All four of them turned to look where the sun created a halo of light, blinding them for a moment. Then, as if it had come straight out of the sun, a motorcycle burst into view, cresting the top of the mountain and then driving straight down the side, leaving a trail of dust blowing up behind the back tire. Treadon blinked, and the motorcycle was on the road, driving toward them from the east. The bike came to a stop an inch from Xander's Bentley. "Careful," Xander started, but cut off when Gabe stepped off the motorcycle. Gabe had a wild look in his eyes, 2 blackened streaks across his cheek, both of which still oozed. Darkened blood trailed down his thick neck. He wore all black, long leather coat and riding gear. His clothes were torn and dirty. A rip in his sleeve revealed more blackened skin. "Whoa, you look worse than Treadon," Jaren said. Gabe threw his kickstand out, jumped off the bike, and stepped across the barrier without breaking stride. He stopped in front of Treadon, looking him up and down. There was a moment when Gabe blinked, 2 seconds too long, and the muscles on his face relaxed slightly. Relief. When he glanced at Abigail, his expression changed, his eyes widening slightly. Treadon read an apology in the look. That's when he noticed his mom's face. Abigail was livid. The locked stare and the tension that squeezed the corners of her mouth spoke of anger, a secret exposed. "No." Treadon looked again. Underneath Abigail's anger, another emotion played with the light in her eyes. Concern. Not just for Treadon, but sincere concern for Gabe. And from the looks of it, Treadon wasn't the only one that had got in an accident that night. "I had to know if he was hurt," Gabe said. "We'll talk about it later." Abigail shook her head like she could shake away the images in her mind. Gabe turned back to Treadon. "A bit dirty, but he's up and walking, so that's a good sign." He clapped Treadon on the shoulder. Pain sent a wave of blackness, red sparks flashing behind his eyes. Treadon couldn't keep in the yelp of pain, the dizziness sending him down to one knee. "Careful." Abigail came down to Treadon's level, checking the wound on his shoulder a little closer. "If there are any injuries, I'll cover it," Xander said. "No questions asked. All medical bills paid if we could avoid any legal paperwork. I'd like to keep Jaren's record clean for his future. I'm sure you understand that." Gabe and Abigail exchanged glances. It wasn't so much that the request was odd. It was that both Abigail and Gabe wanted to avoid the police as much as Xander did. Maybe the reason for Gabe's appearance wasn't exactly legal either. Gabe nodded. "No police. No report. Agreed. I'll call Miss Littleton, and she'll make sure the car gets taken care of." Xander cleared his throat. "I have one more favor to ask." There was an awkward pause. "Would you take Jaren home with you? Let him stay for a few days. I've got some business I need to wrap up, something I need to take care of, and I don't want him home alone." "I don't need a babysitter," Jaren said, arms folded over his chest. "I'm not worried about you making your own meals. I need you away from the estate for a few days. A precaution." "Dad!" Jaren took a step closer to Xander. "Tell me what's going on. I can help." Xander looked his son straight in the eyes. "Remember our agreement. You're going to play football." Xander put a hand on Jaren's shoulder. "Don't be like me. Don't let greed take everything that's truly important." Then he stepped back, straightening his jacket as if he were about to step into a business meeting. "If you would allow him to stay, as a favor to me." He addressed Abigail, like the last moment with his son hadn't happened. "Of course, he's welcome, always." Abigail stood and put her hand on Jaren's arm. Xander walked to his Bentley and climbed inside without looking back. Jaren's face was steel, every muscle taut. Finally, Jaren walked to the Pontiac and climbed inside, slamming the door. Treadon watched Xander's car pull out onto the highway and disappear. Treadon hoped he was wrong, but there was little doubt in his mind that Xander Caliban had just said his final goodbye.